Chapter 52, Spectator. Stop thinking about the bloody IOU. Let's discuss the ritualistic magic. Old Neil put away the candles, cauldron, silver knife, and other items with a relaxed expression. Klein really wanted to shrug his shoulders like the Americans in his previous life, but ultimately could not bring himself to do something that ungentlemanly. He turned his focus toward the ritualistic magic and threw out detailed questions that puzzled him, receiving answers from them. For example, the incantations had a particular format. As long as they were satisfied and the key meaning was expressed in Hermes, the rest could be left to one's creativity. Of course, blasphemy or disrespectful descriptions were absolutely forbidden. The mysticism class lasted until noon before old Neil coughed twice. We have to return to Zutland Street. With that said, he grumbled in an indistinct manner. To get these bloody materials, I missed my beloved breakfast. Klein looked around both amused and puzzled. Mr. Neil, do you have a chef? Or a maidservant in charge of cooking? A weekly salary of £12 could hire several servants. According to the newspapers, with board and lodging provided, hiring an ordinary chef cost anywhere between 12 to 15 soli a week. It did not even need a pound. A maidservant to do miscellaneous chores was even cheaper. Their weekly salaries ranged between 3 soli 6 pence to 6 soli. Of course, one could not bear any hope of them having any culinary skills. That's not right. With Mr. Neil's debt of £30, it's only normal he doesn't hire any chefs or servants. It seems I've asked another question I should not have asked. While Klein regretted his question, old Neil shook his head without minding it. I often attempt ritualistic magic, research extraordinary items, and read corresponding documents at home, so I don't nor is it possible that I hire ordinary people as chefs, valets, or maidservants. I only hire someone to clean up the place regularly. And if they are not ordinary people, do you think they will be willing to do such jobs? I seem to have asked a silly question. It's possibly because I will not do anything that involves mysticism at home, explained Klein in a self-deprecating manner. Old Neil had long stood up, wore his round felt hat, and while walking out the door, rambled on. I seem to smell pan-fried foie gras. Once the IOU is completely settled, I'll definitely have one set. For lunch, I'll definitely eat roasted pork glazed with apple juices. No, that's not enough. I must have a sausage infused with mashed potatoes. You are making me hungry. Klein swallowed his saliva as he caught up to old Neil and headed for the nearby public carriage stop. After returning to Zutland Street, old Neil suddenly grunted after stepping down the carriage. What do I see? Goddess, what am I seeing? He was suddenly as nimble as a 17 or 18-year-old lad. He quickly came to the roadside and picked up an item. Klein leaned close out of curiosity and looked carefully. He realized it was a wallet with fine workmanship. With his lack of experience, he could barely tell if the dark brown wallet was made of buffalo skin or sheepskin, but he noticed a small light blue logo embroidered on the side of the wallet, a white dove spreading its wings as if ready to take off. That was Klein's first impression. The second thing he noticed was the stack of paper notes in the bulging wallet. There were more than 20 gray notes imprinted with black ink, gold pounds. Old Neil opened up the wallet and pulled out the notes. When he looked at it carefully, he immediately chuckled. 10-pound notes. The Honorable Founder and Protector, William I. Wow, goddess, there's a total of 30 notes. There's also a few 5-pound notes, 1 pound and 5 soli notes. More than 300 pounds? That's a huge amount of money in every meaning of the word. I might not even earn that much in 10 years. Klein's breathing turned heavy involuntarily. As the amount of gold pounds was immense, picking up such a wallet was equivalent to picking up a briefcase of banknotes in his previous life. I wonder which gentleman dropped it. He can't be someone ordinary, analyzed Klein calmly. Such a wallet was clearly not a woman's. There's no need to care who he is, said old Neil with a chuckle. It's not like we attempted to divine and take money that doesn't belong to us. We should wait here for a moment. I believe the gentleman will soon be back searching for it. It's not something that can be given up no matter who it is. Klein heaved a sigh of relief. He had a brand new understanding of old Neil's morals. He was rather worried that he would have used the goddess's bestowment as an excuse and paid off his debt. He was still wondering how to prevent it and persuade him otherwise. Is this, do as you wish, but do no harm? Klein suddenly learned something new. The duo did not wait more than a minute by the streets when a luxurious four-wheeled carriage zoomed over. Its side had a light blue logo with a dove spreading its wings. The carriage stopped, and a middle-aged man dressed in a black formal suit with a bow tie of the same color alighted. He looked at the wallet, took off his hat, and said politely, "Sirs, that should be my master's wallet. Your logo is proof of everything, but I need to make additional verifications. This is to be responsible for all parties. Might I ask how much money is there in the wallet?" replied old Neil politely. The middle-aged man was taken aback as he said in a self-deprecating manner almost immediately, "As a butler, I do not know how much money master had in his wallet. Sorry, please permit me to ask." "As you wish." Old Neil gestured for him to do as he pleased. The middle-aged man walked to the carriage's side and through the window, conversed with the person within. He approached Klein and old Neil again and smiled. "More than 300 pounds, but less than 350 pounds. My master does not remember the exact number." "Does not remember? That's really some filthy rich guy. If I had that much money on me, I would definitely be counting it again and again." Klein was filled with envy. Old Neil nodded and handed the wallet back. "With the goddess as proof, this belongs to you." The middle-aged man took the wallet over and did an estimate before pulling out 3 10-pound notes. "My master is Sir Deweyville. He wishes to commend your morals. This is what an honest person should receive. Please do not reject it." "Sir Deweyville? The one who established the Deweyville Trust? The Sir Deweyville who provided cheap rental apartments to the working class?" Klein immediately remembered the name. He was a knight that his brother respected but did not believe was grounded in reality. "Thank you, Sir Deweyville. He is a kind and generous gentleman." Old Neil did not stand on ceremony as he received the 3 notes. After watching Sir Deweyville's carriage depart, he turned to look at Klein when he saw that there was no one around. He flicked the notes and chuckled. 30 pounds. The IOU is settled. I said it will be settled in a reasonable manner. This is the power of magic. Holy f***ing power of magic. That actually works?" Klein was once again flabbergasted. A few minutes later, he entered the building's stairwell, and while heading to the security company, he asked puzzledly, "Mr. Neil, why didn't you ask for more money?" "Do not be greedy. One must take care not to be greedy when doing ritualistic magic. Temperance is a critical trait needed by every mystery prior if they wish to live long," explained old Neil happily. In a huge ballroom, candles were burning on a few chandeliers, emitting a fragrance that soothed the minds of people. By the sheer number of candles, they produced a light in no way inferior to that of gas lamps. There were long tables with pan-fried foie gras, grilled steak, roasted chicken, fried tongue-fish, desi oysters, mutton stew, cream soup, and other delicacies. In addition, there were bottles of mist champagne, Ormer grape wine, and Southville red wine. They were all glistening with a tempting glow under the light. Servants in red vests carried trays with crystal cups and shuttled between the gentlemen and ladies dressed both elegantly or gorgeously. Audrey Hall was wearing a collared, high-waisted, pale white dress with engagiantes. Her corset was tightly fitted, while her voluminous layers were puffed up perfectly with a cage crinoline. Her long blonde hair was coiled up in an elegant bun, and the earrings, necklace, and rings she wore sparkled brightly. At her feet were a pair of white dancing shoes that were stitched with roses and diamonds. "How many petticoats am I even wearing?" 5, 6. Wearing white silk gloves, Audrey caressed her crinoline gently with her right hand. Her left hand was holding a glass of clear champagne. Audrey was nothing like her usual self, usually placing herself center stage of banquets and making her the focus of attention. Instead, she avoided the bustle and quietly stood in the shadows of hanging curtains by the French windows. She took a sip of champagne as she watched the crowd as though she did not belong. Earl Wolf's youngest son is chatting with Viscount Conrad's daughter. He likes to move his forearm to reinforce what he says. The bigger the movement of his forearm, the more unbelievable his words. That is something gleaned from experience. He can't stop trying to elevate himself by putting other people down. However, he can't help but feel guilty. It can be seen by the way he talks and his body language. Duchess Della has repeatedly covered her mouth while laughing with her left hand today. Ah, I see. She is showing off her pure ocean blue sapphire. Her husband, Duke Negan, is discussing the current situation with a few conservative nobles. Since the banquet began, he has searched for Duchess Della once. They almost never make eye contact. Maybe they aren't as in love as they pretend to be. Baron Larry has made Madame Parnes laugh 7 times. That's very normal, nothing strange about it. But why does she look at her husband with guilty eyes? Oh, they have gone their separate ways. That's not right. The directions they are headed leads to the garden. In the extravagant banquet, Audrey saw many details she never noticed in the past. There was an instant where she nearly believed that she was watching an opera. Everyone is a good opera actor. She sighed silently as her eyes remained limpid. At that moment, she suddenly sensed something and turned her head. She cast her gaze onto a dark corner in the large balcony outside. In the shadows was a huge golden retriever sitting there silently. She was looking inside at Audrey while half her body was hidden in the darkness. Susie. The corners of Audrey's mouth twitched as her expression instantly changed. She could no longer maintain her state as a spectator. Chapter 53, Listener. An ancient 3-masted sailboat was navigating through a tumultuous storm in the sea. It was not fast, and its displacement was lacking. With the weather and the sea looking like a cataclysmic scene, the sailboat was like a withered leaf separated from its tree. However, regardless of how the typhoons rampaged or how terrifying the waves were, it continued sailing peacefully without any signs of tilting. Alger Wilson stood on the empty deck as he looked at the massive waves that resembled mountains. His thoughts were a mystery. It's going to be Monday again, he muttered silently to himself. It was the day belonging to Earth Mother, the beginning of a series of waxing and waning. However, it meant something different to Alger. It belonged to a mysterious existence forever enveloped in grayish-white fog. At least I haven't been reduced to a madman. He stopped looking around as he gave a self-deprecating chuckle. At this moment, one of the only few sailors he had leaned over and asked reverently, "My lord, where are we setting course for this time?" Alger surveyed his surroundings and said in a calm voice, "Pursue the listener from the Aurora Order." The storm subsided as mist emanated. On a strange sailboat with cannons on board, an 8- or 9-year-old boy with soft yellow hair was looking at pirates around him in fear. They were disorderly. Some enjoyed barrels of beer, some swung around with ropes, others mocked each other, and some even fought with their fists. He turned to look at a black-robed man standing in the shadows. He suppressed his voice and asked, "Father, where are we going?" 5 days ago was his first time seeing his father, a father who proclaimed to be an adventurer. If not for the oil painting his late mother left him that confirmed his father's identity and the fact that the orphanage had opened its doors to him, he was absolutely unwilling to leave his hometown and follow his only kin, who was also nearly a stranger. The man in the shadows lowered his head and looked at his son. With an amiable expression, he answered, "Jack, I'm bringing you to a holy place, a holy residence where the Creator once lived." "Is that the kingdom of God? We mortals can only enter by winning his grace." Jack had been well educated by his mother and knew this much. He was both surprised and fearful about the matter. Standing in the shadows, the man had an unforgettable jawline as though he was a sculpture chiseled by the best artisan. He placed his hand to his ear and made a listening pose. He replied in a tone that sounded like sleep-talking. "Jack, mortals are a wrong concept. The Creator created this world, and He is everywhere. He exists in every living being. Therefore, all beings have godhood. Once the godhood attains a particular level, they can become an angel. The 7 fake gods at present are only powerful angels. Look, I can now hear the teachings of the Creator. Ah, how extraordinary is this revelation! Life is only a tour of the spirit. When the spirit is sufficiently potent and resilient, we can find our godhood and fuse with even more godhoods." Jack could not understand the complicated description. He shook his head and asked another question he previously did not have the chance to. "Father, I heard from Mother that after the Creator created this world, He split into all beings and does not exist in actuality. Then, why does His holy residence exist?" As a 7- to 8-year-old child, he was logical. The man with the chiseled face was taken aback. He turned his head away as though he was listening to more murmurings. Suddenly, he slumped down, knees on the deck. His exposed skin protruded black shards. He clenched his head with both hands as his expression warped, and he shouted in extreme pain, "They are lying." After lunch, having had old Neil promise him that he would bring him to the underground market the next time he went, Klein slowly returned to the Blackthorn Security Company. He chose the 2 options of reading the documents in the staff office and practicing his abilities, or take the opportunity to go out and act as a seer in the divination club before Captain Dunn stopped him. However, before he could make the decision, he saw Dunsmith walk in. He was dressed in the usual black trench coat and half-top hat. "Captain, any updates?" Klein thought of the whereabouts of the Antigonus family's notebook as he asked with concern. Without showing any signs of fatigue in his gray eyes, Dunn said, "The facts have corroborated that the Antigonus family's notebook is in Ray Bieber's hands. However, he has vanished completely. I have already informed the various Nighthawks teams of this matter through a telegram. They were requested to pay attention to the various piers and steam locomotive stations. The first batch of printed portraits was mailed out yesterday afternoon and will be printed in various major newspapers. How nice it would be if there were phones, fax machines, surveillance cameras, and big data. What a pity. I know how to use all of them and even understand a little of the logic behind it." Klein exhaled silently. "But regardless, we can consider ourselves as having found the notebook. And this is all thanks to you. Of course, it still needs another round of confirmations. I have already sent a telegram to the Backlund Diocese, requesting them to escort sealed artifact 2-049 here. It was once a dangerous item of the Antigonus family. It can help us know if Ray Bieber is a descendant of the Antigonus family. A Grade 2 sealed artifact. Dangerous. They can be used with care and moderation." Klein had originally wanted to ask about the sealed artifact, its special abilities, and the danger it posed out of curiosity, but he instantly recalled that he lacked the necessary clearance. He had no choice but to give up. "May Goddess bless us." Klein tapped 4 spots on his chest, forming the sign of the full moon. Dunn pushed open the door to his office and said with a slight nod, "The Goddess has always been protecting us." "Klein, if you had not chosen Seer, you would be a formal member after this matter is verified. You could have chosen Sleepless, but pity. To be frank, I'm still puzzled over your choice. Although Corpse Collector is quite off-putting, you have seen Daily as well. You should know that spirit mediums vary in strength. As for Mystery Priors, they're a good choice too. At the very least, you have old Neil as a role model, so he will make sure the risk of losing control is minimized." With regards to this question, Klein had prepared an answer from the beginning. He just never had a chance to use it since Dunn did not ask. He was only able to answer in passing. He organized his words and said, "My considerations stem from the fact that Seers and Mystery Priors are considered Beyonders with a support role. They do not need to always face enemies, for that's too dangerous. And both you and old Neil said that in the domain of mystery and Beyonders, curiosity and experimentation usually brings about terrifying outcomes. Describing Mystery Priors as prying mysteries made me worried, so, as you know, I was only an ordinary graduate not long ago. A lack of guts is the only reason I made such a choice. I have to say that this is a very reasonable answer that goes beyond my expectations." Dunn massaged his temples and chuckled. He turned halfway as his gray eyes sized up Klein. "Continue going out for now. Do not limit yourself to the paths leading from Welch's Place to Iron Cross Street. Perhaps you might sense the notebook and help us confirm Ray Bieber's location." "All right." Klein realized that he no longer need to be in a dilemma. He bade Dunn farewell and turned around, his heart beginning to count. 3, 2. "Hold on," shouted Dunn. Klein turned his head and smiled. "Captain, is there anything else?" Dunn coughed slightly and said, "Well, support Beyonders have to fight their enemies from time to time. Although Seers sound like they can avoid such battles, they are not to be ignored. You have to maintain your shooting skills and work on increasing your strength. This is what I'm working hard towards." Klein pointed outside. "I'll be leaving." "All right." Wait a moment." Dunn shouted for him once more. As he pondered, he said, "Perhaps I have to consider hiring a combat trainer for you. Of course, this matter is under the premise that you become a formal member." Klein responded tersely before asking carefully, "Captain, is there anything else?" No. Seeing Klein's unbelieving eyes, Dunn shook his head and smiled. He emphasized again, "Really nothing." Only then did Klein walk past the partition divider. He bade farewell to Roseanne and Mrs. Oriana and headed to the shooting club for practice. With all of this done, he went to the divination club and saw the beautiful Angelica sitting there reading magazines leisurely. "Home," Klein silently read. With the cane in hand, he walked over and greeted with a smile. "Good afternoon, Madame Angelica." "Good afternoon, Mr. Moretti." In no rush, Angelica put down her magazine. She stood up and said, "Not long after you left yesterday, Mr. Glassy came. He just recovered from a major illness." Klein heaved a sigh of relief as he smiled. "That sure is something worth celebrating." Upon hearing this, Angelica, who was secretly observing him, lowered her voice and asked out of curiosity, "Mr. Glassy said that you are a very, very, very magical doctor. Are you?" "What?" Klein looked at the lady in front of him, suspecting if he was hearing things. "What made him think I'm a doctor? Even I do not know." Chapter 54. The First Divination Requester. Upon seeing Klein's odd expression, Angelica immediately felt her beliefs waver. "Is that so? Mr. Glassy mentioned that you were able to tell of an ailment in his lungs simply from observation." Her voice softened until she finally shut up. "Observation? A dark glabella?" Klein was instantly enlightened as he shook his head with a chortle. "I believe Mr. Glassy was mistaken. He was planning on being perfunctory, but after recalling that no one sought his divination services the entire afternoon yesterday, his mind whirled. It affected his goal of acting as a seer, so he explained, "It's actually a form of divination." "Divination? But Mr. Glassy only mentioned that you observed his face." "That's also considered divination?" asked Angelica in shock and doubt. Klein smiled, composed. "As a member of the Divination Club, you should know about palm reading, right? Palm reading was not patented by the Futaholic Empire. Even on Earth, India and Old Europe had developed similar principles, much less in a world with beyonder powers." "I know about it, but it seems you did not read his palm. Were you observing him in secret?" asked Angelica curiously. "I was using face reading." Klein cooked up a lie. "Its principles aren't very different from palm reading at a fundamental level." "Really?" Angelica's eyes were filled with disbelief. In order to develop his career as a seer, Klein chuckled. He pretended to be in thought as he tapped his glabella twice. He focused his eyes, and Angelica's aura presented itself. Her head was purple, her limbs were red, her throat was blue. There was no problems with her health except for some colors being duller. However, that was a manifestation of ordinary fatigue. Klein then looked at her emotions and saw orange mixed in with some red and blue. It also meant warmth coupled with some excitement and thought. Thankfully, after realizing that there was nothing abnormal about her, Klein planned on deactivating his spirit vision. But it was at that moment when he suddenly saw a rich darkness hidden in the depths of her emotional colors. Furthermore, she is lacking a little of white, an eagerness to improve. Klein nodded while in thought. "Mr. Moretti, were you reading my face?" Seeing the young gentleman in black in front of her turn silent abruptly, while seriously sizing her up, Angelica keenly noticed something. She asked in a half-curious and half-worried manner. Klein did not immediately reply. Instead, he tapped his glabella lightly as he wore a look of scrutiny. Just as Angelica was feeling unease, he said warmly, "Madam Angelica, there are some sorrows and pains which you should not seal in your heart." Angelica's eyes widened as her mouth turned agape. However, she did not say a word. She looked at Klein in his half-top hat with an apparent scholarly bearing. She heard him use a deep, comforting, and warm voice to say, "You need to either go mountain climbing, a game of tennis, or perform a tragic play to exhaust your body due to exercising. Let your tears flow down uninhibited, then cry and scream. Express all those emotions. That will be very helpful to your health." The moment those words entered her ears, Angelica felt like she had transformed into a statue. She stood there motionless. She tried hard to blink as she lowered her head in a fluster, saying deeply, "Thank you for your suggestion. It seems like there are many members here today." Klein did not continue. As though he had not done any divinations prior, he turned to his side and looked to the meeting room at the end of the corridor. Sunday afternoon. At least 50 members. Angelica's voice sounded a little hoarse. She only mentioned the key terms. She paused as her vocal pace gradually returned to normal. "Do you want tea or coffee?" "Side black tea." Klein nodded slightly. He politely took off his hat and slowly walked to the meeting room. Only when he vanished behind the door did Angelica exhale slowly. The Divination Club's meeting room was very large. It was nearly twice the size of Klein's high school classroom. In the past, only 5 or 6 members would be present, making it look extremely empty. Now, there were dozens of fortune tellers sitting in different spots. They filled up most of the room. Sunlight shone into the room through the few oriel windows. The members were either discussing softly among themselves or asking Hanas Vincent questions. Otherwise, they were practicing and attempting divination or drinking coffee and reading newspapers by themselves. Such a scene made Klein feel like he was back to his schooling days on Earth. The difference was that it was noisier and more rowdy back then, without the tranquility of the meeting room. He looked around, but he didn't see familiar faces like Glassy or Edward Steve. So he casually picked up a divination textbook, found a corner, and started flipping through it leisurely. Very soon, Angelica came in with a cup of tea and left it on the table before Klein. As she was leaving quietly, she suddenly saw Mr. Moretti take out an exquisite-looking silver chain from his left sleeve. There was a chunk of pure topaz hanging on the silver chain. What is he doing? Angelica slowed down subconsciously and focused her gaze at Klein. Klein held the silver chain with his left hand and allowed the topaz to hang above the side black tea, just short of touching the surface of the liquid. With a serene expression, he half closed his eyes, and the atmosphere around him suddenly turned quiet. The topaz started moving slightly, along with the special-looking silver chain, in a clockwise direction. Upon seeing this, Angelica found Mr. Moretti extremely mysterious. "The black tea you provide is great," Klein said softly after he opened his eyes with a smile. His actions were intentionally done for Angelica to see. If he wanted people to select him for his divination services, Angelica's recommendation was a very crucial factor. Since he wanted to act as a seer, Klein no longer had any reservations. He completely personified the identity. "Yes, Mr. Vaughness is very picky about the quality of tea," Angelica said, stunned. Klein put away his spirit pendulum by winding it properly. Then, he raised the white porcelain cup with floral design. With a smile, he gestured politely at her with his cup. Angelica returned to the reception hall, but she no longer had the mood to read magazines. She sat there, gazing into the distance. It was a wonder what she was thinking about. This continued until there were knocks on the door. She jolted awake and hurriedly looked at the entrance, only to see a lady dressed in a light blue dress. The lady took off her veiled hat with a powder blue ribbon. She looked calm and melancholic. "Good afternoon, esteemed lady. Would you like to join the divination club, or are you looking for a divination?" Angelica asked like clockwork. "I want a divination." The lady had a beautiful pair of eyes hidden with sorrow, and she bit her lower lip as she spoke. Angelica guided her to the sofa and explained to her how the divination club worked in detail. She picked up an album and handed it over. "You can pick anyone." In her low spirits, the lady flipped through the album seriously. As there were too many club members there that day, there were too many choices. It left her quite upset. "Can you recommend one? From these few pages." She pointed at the middle section of the album, omitting the fortune tellers priced above 2 soldi and those below 4 pence. Angelica took the album and looked at it for a few minutes. She deliberated her words before saying, "I suggest this gentleman." The lady who looked uneasy took a glance and realized that it was a fortune teller named Klein Moretti. "Mr. Moretti just joined the club. Is his divination reliable?" she asked worriedly. Angelica nodded with great affirmation. "Another member of the club and I are certain that Mr. Moretti is an outstanding fortune teller. If it wasn't for his just joining the club, he wouldn't take such low fees." "I understand." The depressed girl nodded. "I'll pick Mr. Moretti for a divination then." "All right, please hold on for a second." Angelica took the album and walked towards the meeting room. She came next to Klein and said with a suppressed voice, "Mr. Moretti, someone wants you to divine for them. Which room would you like to use?" That was effective. "My first business is here." Klein put down his teacup and nodded calmly as he said, "Topaz room." "All right." Angelica walked slowly ahead of him and led him to Topaz room before opening its wooden door. Klein sat behind the table that had various divination tools on it. He waited less than a minute before he saw a woman in a light blue dress walk in. She looked down and melancholic. Seizing the opportunity when she was closing the door, he tapped his glabella twice. "The yellow color in her stomach seems a little dull. The dark color of her emotions is very heavy, mainly worry and anxiety." Klein looked her over carefully and leaned backwards. He then lifted his hand to cut off his spiritual vision. "Good day, Mr. Moretti." The woman in the light blue dress sat down. "Good afternoon. How may I address you?" Klein asked politely, not carrying much hope of getting an answer. As a keyboard warrior, He knew that many people were not willing to use their real names during divination. "You can call me Anna." The girl put her veiled cap aside. She looked at Klein with mixed anticipation and doubt, and said, "I would like to divine about my fiancé's situation. He traveled to the southern continent in March for a business deal. He sent me and his family a telegram last month on the 3rd, saying that he was going to set sail and return. But he did not return after 20 days. At first, I believed that his delay was due to the Berserk Sea's weather, but as of today, it has been more than a month. The ship he took, the Alfalfa, still hasn't arrived at Mad Harbor." The ocean that separated the northern and southern continent was called the Berserk Sea. It was well known for natural calamities and its countless dangerous currents. If it was not for Emperor Roselle, who sent men to discover a few safer sailing routes, countries in the northern continent would still have yet to enter the age of colonization, let alone lay an underwater cable to complete a transoceanic telegraph. Klein looked at his very first client of his career as a seer and asked carefully, "Which divination method do you wish to use?"